because we have the space and we have the resources to do something, is it in the best interest, number one, for our students and our families? We want to make sure that they're protected. We want to make sure our safety for our teachers, for our families. That's priority.
Juan Corona, welcome back to In This Together, episode 4 from Maywood District 89. We haven't spoken since September. It seems like it's been a while.
It has been.
Yeah, I sort of missed talking to all of you, and I looked at the calendar. I'm like, where did the time go? But we were just talking offline, and my perception is that people are just really busy behind the scenes. Maybe kind of the glow of back to school has faded. People are kind of retreating to their classrooms and doing what they need to do, our virtual classrooms. And we were talking about how where we are in our climates, it's getting cold. The hibernation season is upon us. So I'm excited to chat with you again. Just a quick update. What's going on the ground in terms of, coronavirus? We're seeing some spikes in certain places. Are the majority of your students still working remotely? Where are you right now?
Yes, we are still fully remote. We were looking at our numbers and that spike, as you said, with COVID, but our plan is to bring our SPED students kindergarten through third, and we're applying our hybrid model that we created. But because the numbers are there, we have an opportunity to also bring in our ELs K3. We're looking at all the information, but that spike is really throwing a wrench into our plan. But for the most part, we are all still remote.
Yeah, I feel like that's happening in a lot of places. I mean, it's hard to contemplate going back when you're seeing kind of the news that's going on. And I don't know about you, but here where I am, even in New Hampshire, where it's been relatively quiet, Elevation's office is in Boston, but I'm remote in New Hampshire. It just seems like we're starting to sort of know people who were affected. I mean, even my son was exposed to someone, so he's been out of school. He's been in person for a while in third grade, but now he's out of school. Is that the case with you all as well? Does it just seem like not only statistics, but just noticing it?
Yes. And a thing to remember is that we have our teachers that are teaching, but they also have their personal lives. So, it impacts everybody. As much as we want to come in, we have to take all factors into account. Now, the weather is changing here, so that the time is going to go back, and it's getting darker. I think that all adds to the dulling of that start of the year.
Yeah, it's part of the formula for sure. I can remember teaching this time of year being one of the hardest times. Just you're in it, and it's a very productive time, but it can also be a very stressful time. And honestly, I mean, I speak with you all the time and lots of teachers, but I can't imagine, what it's like to be in this remotely and have the doubt and not knowing sort of what's going to happen as we move forward. All right, so let's go back to our conversation in September. You were talking about map testing at that time, and you were eagerly awaiting those results. I remember chatting with you about that. You were using other sort of data points to figure out where your students are. At this point, a month or so later, have you been able to look at that data to help you differentiate instruction for ELs? And if so, how have you gone about doing it? And what else have you used to make that happen?
Absolutely. Our data person is still crunching the numbers, but preliminary data is looking great. Here in our district, I'm looking at our students who are in the dual language program. And on the MAP assessment, they're tested in both languages. Our Spanish for those students is really strong in the dual language program. Our English, based on our language allocation, they are where they need to be. Obviously, we want them to be able to navigate both languages. I have a particular interest in our students who are in third through eighth, who are in the gen ed setting. There is, just again, looking preliminary at numbers, it looks like there is a higher need for some of our students in that area. I am surprised of how many students are at benchmark or higher.
Good.
But having that information now helps me articulate to my ESL resource teachers to increase their collaboration, be more intentional, more strategic when it comes to the language, and obviously language in the content area.
Right. And we've talked about that collaboration, and I am going to get to that later because it's something that you've stressed, and you were actually really impressed by the collaboration that was going on. So I want to put that on the back burner. That is on my agenda of things to chat about now. But one thing that I wanted to ask you about in this whole series, everything we're trying to do here is about making sure how people like you are making sure that English learners have access to equitable instruction and services. And a part of that process for you was, I know you've done a lot of PD, some trainings with Dr. Jose Medina, who was recently on our podcast talking about how lesson planning can actually be a great way to make sure that students are getting equitable access to not only instruction, which may seem obvious, but actually later down the line, it actually has an impact on social justice. It has an impact on dismantling systems of oppression, et cetera. And that was a really interesting conversation. So I just want to kind of connect some dots here because we spoke with him and we've spoken with you for throughout the school year. I'm curious to hear how those trainings have supported your efforts in providing equitable learning opportunities to your English learners. And I mean, I'm not sort of trying to promote Dr. Medina's, PD, but at the same time, I feel like it's pretty interesting and it fits really nicely into what we're talking about.
I think working with Dr. Medina, we can see how strong of an advocate he is for language acquisition, and embraces it all. And that's one of the things that our teachers always say is like, wow, he really speaks to the language. He's really speaking to me directly on how to best support my students. And we are working with him with our dual language teachers. So a lot of it is a student might say a word a certain way, and he's telling us it's not our place to correct it, but to embrace it.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
naturally, you speak to it. So our teachers are like, wow, we were really focused on English time, Spanish time, and he's saying, well, if the student has a language repertoire, bring it in. If they use they have a certain dialect at home, bring it in, because it only empowers the student and makes them have a love for their language, their culture. And we're not saying, hey, don't say it that way. We're saying, oh, that is another way to say it. And I think that was eye-opening for our teachers. Um, in teaching, you want to stick to the plan, but really language is beautiful, and any type of language. We just have to acknowledge it, bring it in, and teach our students when it's the appropriate time, the appropriate register, the audience where you can use that type of language.
Yeah, that's a great explanation from the sort of receiver of the professional development point of view. We got it directly from Dr. Medina. I would just want to sort of expand on a couple things you said. I was a high school Spanish teacher for a long time, and I learned Spanish and was not a heritage speaker. I learned in college and traveled to Spain and Central America, and came to a district, Lynn, Massachusetts, right outside of Boston, that I imagine is probably similar to your district. And with what we've talked about. And so I was this guy coming in who had learned sort of very formal Spanish in Spain, and I had a lot of students from the Dominican Republic and from Puerto Rico, and I could barely understand what they were saying because their dialects were so different. And it didn't take me long to lose that idea of formality and to realize that these students had something to offer. And I actually ended up sort of through that time, because I was young and I was still learning Spanish while I was teaching. Um, I ended up incorporating a lot of that into my own sort of repertoire, just naturally, just thinking about it. But there was that tension of like, how do we, is this a formal, we have to formalize this whole thing? How do we bring that in? And I almost heard sort of a little bit of relief in your voice when you said, for teachers to realize it's okay to bring this in. Do your teachers feel that as well, as sort of relieved, or is it more like, how am I going to make this adjustment?
Oh, there was relief. Certainly, there was relief, and I think we have to remember that a lot of our teachers, and not just here in Illinois, across the states, they are second language learners who um, developed their English, and English was what they took to high school, what they took to college. So we are Spanish speakers, but trained in English.
Hmm.
Um, so when they hear that it's okay to bring that in, they're like, wow, but the book says. I'm like, yeah, the book says it's supposed to be this way, and that again, that register and that environment. But Dr. Medina is saying that a student brings language, whether they're from a small town in Mexico or a big city somewhere else. it's still language, and it's they're making their point across, and we have to acknowledge that. But there was definitely relief on,
Yeah.
okay, that you can say it. Okay, well, I say it too, or "Oh, I say this word," and just in like a 5 minute, we got off topic with Dr. Medina because, oh, I say it this way, or maybe you heard it that way, and it all means the same thing.
Yeah. And it just like I hear you say, it's just the context, right? A student needs to know in what context they sort of use a certain type of language. And I think that's where it becomes and it goes right into this equity conversation because you can't say this way that you've been speaking for your entire life does not work at all. I think you can say in this context, you have to shift to be able to get your point across to a certain audience. But
Mm.
but incorporating and embracing that language, I think, is a huge part of the equity piece. Not sure how it fits into our evolving educational landscape with remote and everything else. And I'd love to get into that, but I know that'll take us hours. So we'll save that for another time. Um, but I'm glad we talked about that because it's nice to kind of connect the dots, as I said. Uh, Family engagement. So you and I have talked a lot about that, along with Assistant Superintendent Maribel Taboada, who couldn't join us today. Um, uh, it's been a huge priority for many districts, and I think particularly for you, you've had a lot to sort of talk about that. Have you been able to continue meeting with parents, or is that evolving, like about how they're supporting learners at home since you're still doing remote learning? And I say this with an 8-year-old upstairs who is under the guidance of 2 former teachers who are struggling with being able to handle this. We have all the technology we need. We have an incredible amount of privilege. We're both teachers, and yet it's really difficult. So how are you handling that in situations that are probably far worse than what we're dealing with?
Well, through my department, I do have a committee. It's called the Bilingual Parent Advisory Committee, and we just met earlier this month. And it was, I have to show them the programming and other things that are about our department. But what came out from that was they still want to learn how to navigate our platforms that we use for our students. So they're advocating for that. But one of the things that they also talked about was self-care, which in the past I've worked with Dr. Fernay Ramirez, who's come out to our district, and he really connects with the parents, um, in his mannerism, in his dialogue, and he uses a lot of music, but it always hits a nerve with our parents. And what his message is, schooling starts at home. And so that's what the parents were asking me. How can we bring this guy in? We want to talk about self-care, mental health, and Dr. Fernay Ramirez does have virtual and in person. So it's just a matter of connecting with him to schedule something. But our parents are asking for the help.
That's great. I mean, we talk about professional development so much for our teachers, and this is PD for parents, really. I
Yeah.
mean, and it's I guess to some it must seem like a strange concept, but now more than ever, that's just totally necessary. And if you're going to buy into family engagement, then why not do something like that? I noted the name down, and we'll make sure we link in here to some of the work that he's done, because I really appreciate you thinking about who has helped you and how others can
Yeah.
use them. Um, Great. So, we were talking about this both offline and at the beginning of our conversation, that I just have been communicating less with people. Like, we have a community brief, an ELL community brief that goes out every week. And last week I didn't send it, even though there was some valuable information, just because I feel like teachers are just can sense, like my own experience tells me that, as I mentioned, they're just very, very busy. Maribel's not with us for that very reason. She's an administrator, but she's just really busy. Um, as that sort of glow, or that like excitement of the beginning of the school year begins to fade, as it does every year, as it naturally does. And I'll speak for myself just when I say that this time of year, as I mentioned earlier, is always the hardest for me. Um, and under all the circumstances now, I'm just curious as to how are your teachers doing? What's your sense as to sort of their own sort of uh, emotional state, in terms of how they're supporting their students, and what are you doing as an administration to help support them right now through this, what I think is a very difficult time?
Absolutely, and I think, our building leaders handle much. They work with our staff, so they have their own little ways of connecting with staff. Because you are right, it's the season is changing. It's getting darker here in the Chicagoland area. Um, we're finishing up our first quarter grades, so that kind of that teachers have a lot on their plate right now. Our data results are in, and we're combing through those to kind of refine our instruction for the next quarter. So they are busy, and that glow, like you said, is starting to wear off. But here in our district, we work with the Student Services Department, and they're rolling out support during teacher PLC time, and they focus on wellness and mindfulness, especially during this time with the pandemic and the spike that we're coming across. They're advocating about taking care of oneself, and ways on how teachers can do that at home or even in the classroom. But it is important. Our teachers are very important to us. And I just love that our student services department has taken that on as how we can best support our teachers, and then the extra love that they get from their building administrator as well.
Yeah, I just feel like now you have to take a deliberate approach to that topic. You can't. It's not something that's avoidable. I mean, it's just real. I mean, the people that I talk to, people that I've taught with for years, are just, I was talking to one person the other day, and she said, I just feel like it's April right now, not October. That just level of, you're tired.
Mhm.
So I think, validating it, understanding it, that it's going on, and then having support is crucial. I want to ask the same question for about your students, because I'll say that we have four kids that are doing many, many different things in terms of how they're schooling. There's one of our kids who's in school full time, and a couple others. One's hybrid and one's remote. And I think right now I'm noticing just my own children that they're, who again are in very, very comparatively very good situations. Um, the stress is catching up with them in very different ways. Oh, and how are you going about addressing that?
Well, part of our remote schedule is that we have built-in office hours for our teachers to communicate with parents and especially our students. They follow up, but I think right there is where teachers are doing a lot of connecting with the students on a more personal level. Um, we want our students to be successful. I've been a part of a couple of home visits too, where a principal has called me and says, "Hey, I want to check in. Can you come out?" And I'm more than happy to do those home visits because I know how much that principal cares. That it's her priority to ensure the safety and well-being of her students. So I really love that about that principal. That she'll tell me every day, like, "Oh, I have so many emails. I'm checking with the families," but the extra layer of actually going out into the community and saying, "Hey, are you okay? We just want to touch base. Let us know what you need." Um, we have given our families who have had spotty internet connection, we do have hotspots for them now. It's just that constant checking in, talking, and I really love that our principals are, all of them are really looking into how to best support the students. At our middle school, I do want to say that they continue to advocate and support PBIS. So they have their own little ways of connecting with students and rewarding them for the positive behaviors that they're seeing. Even though we're remote, they really want to acknowledge that, especially for our middle school students who need that extra layer of support.
I think I know what it is, but tell me that acronym PBIS. What's that stand for?
The positive behavior intervention system.
That's what I figured. Yeah. I mean that's just getting ahead, making sure that you're sort of depositing money in the bank before you go and take it out,
Mhm.
right? Like making sure that students are aware of the amazing things that they're doing right now. And everybody, there's never been a time where you, I don't think, where you can give more sort of compliments for just what students are doing sort of on a regular basis. I mean,
Mhm.
they're in difficult situations. I like what you said about home visits too, and getting out in the community, because that must be even more powerful now because people are so isolated, and so if you're doing that in a safe way and when you need to, that must be really, really powerful.
Mhm. Yeah, and like I said, I really love that this principal does it.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Shout out
good.
to Principal Perez from Washington.
All right. Well, thank you for what you're doing, Principal Perez. It's an inspiration to others, I'm sure. Um, Learning loss. We talked a lot about it, you and I, and Marty Bell as well. I think we focused on it in our last conversation, but we were really talking about like last spring. And now that you had mentioned earlier, like the quarters closing, there's grading, there's that kind of added stress, and that's a time where we are beginning to evaluate where students have come between September or late August and now, which seems crazy that that much time has passed, and it's that time to actually grade and assess. Um, are we at the point yet where you've been able to kind of measure the progress in language and content development during this school year? Because there's been so much focus on the learning loss in the spring that I feel like it's not something that's discussed so much. And I guess if so, what trends have you noticed? And if not, why not? And how are you going to assess moving forward?
Well, like I said before, our Spanish data is showing great results. I actually got the opportunity to jump in on some of these some of these classrooms where even at the kindergarten level, right now in October, the students are beginning to read, and it just goes to show how much the teacher is investing in the classroom. So, to me, I'm not. I'm surprised at how the numbers are showing, but not surprised by the commitment that our teachers have invested into our students. Um, what I have seen, and with the support of, I just rolled out the elevation progress monitoring. It's the first time we're doing it in the district, so I think there we are looking at how we can better support our classroom teacher with that support from the ESL teacher, because now we're really looking at the language domains, and we can more strategically put in strategies to support. So learning, as far as learning loss for our Spanish dual students, I don't see much. For our English, again, that's my area where I'm focusing on. Is part of my dissertation work is how we can best support our students 3 through 8. Again, it's looking at that data and then looking at how our students are grouped, when ESL teachers are coming in to support. Um, I have to remind myself this is one data point. So we're going to look at it. We're going to see how we can improve, but we won't know again until we take the next assessment. So
Right.
it's like I want to do so much, but
Yeah.
I can't pull the trigger yet because we only have that one data point.
Yeah, you get so excited when you get data in, I'm sure, because it was so sparse back in the spring, that you want to do something about it. But I think sort of a deliberate, cautious approach is needed right now. Um, you mentioned the support from ELL teachers to content teachers. That's something we had talked about before. You're really impressed by the collaboration that was going on, and I was too. I mean, just in our discussions, that's something that people have been wanting to happen for a long time. And
Mhm.
in many cases, in many districts, the people that I've talked to, at least, it does seem that it has been an affordance of this remote learning situation, that there has been more collaboration, probably partly because it just has to happen because nobody knew what they were doing with remote learning when we started, and possibly that there's just more flexible time for people to meet in different ways. So that's been very good. Um, you mentioned those monitoring forms, which I've actually heard a lot of people using those monitoring forms. You can do it in any way, but you're talking about using it from elevation, so it's electronic,
Mhm.
to be able to kind of not only do it for compliance, but to actually see where students are at a given moment in time, get information from those content teachers quickly to the EL team so that they can collaborate. Um, it sounds like that collaboration has continued, even though both groups have become, as we've talked about over the course of this conversation, increasingly busy. How have you maintained that? Is that something that's happening naturally? Are you sort of overseeing that? Because it seems like it's occurring.
It's natural, and I mentioned it in one of the earlier interviews that because the teachers are being included in the PLC time, they've been able to collaborate that way, and it's been growing. Again, I have access to go into classrooms, so I saw my middle school teachers either co-teaching or being an active participant, encouraging students, advocating for them to ask questions. So either it's a two teacher model, or if they're pulling a small group, you can see that they're on a mission to make sure that the students are understanding the content, but also advocating for what they need, and that's coming from their collaboration.
Yeah, my sense is that your district does a really good job with this, a particularly good job. And you can hear that just in all the conversations that you have. And when it becomes automatic, and you've designed things over the years, and Mighty Bell talked about this, that have allowed this sort of organic thing. I mean, you need to kind of rev it up somehow, right? You need to like prime the engine, but you've done that. And it seems like it's happening naturally. It would be interesting for you, just something food for thought at some point, for you to present that to, maybe these virtual conferences, to think about how your district has gone about doing that, because I think a lot of people still haven't cracked the code with that, and it must be harder to do now in a remote environment. So food for thought, no pressure,
Thank
but
you.
I think
Yeah.
that would be interesting to hear. I think others will be. We've just kind of scratched the surface of it. Um, so there's been a lot of success with what you've done. You all have talked a lot about the power of resiliency, the power of flexibility. You're all clearly very passionate over there about supporting your teachers and your students. But what new challenges are you facing now, and how do you anticipate overcoming them moving forward?
I think one of the biggest challenges coming from my department is prepping for the access test. Our state superintendent has given us direction to do this as an in-person assessment. I'm looking at the logistics. I think we are able to do it. But to me, that just because you have the logistics doesn't mean that it's the best practice. A team of us are going to be meeting with the superintendent to discuss options, because I have the ability to do it, but a neighboring school district might not. So we want to see what options there are, and really look at how, because it's planning. I'm planning now for the test in January.
It'll be here before you know it. Yeah.
And I'm going to have to, if we need more people, they need to be trained. We need to set up schedules. We need to set up procedures. If we're doing the 50 students in the building, how many teachers will I need? How many students in the classroom? Is it in one sitting? Is it two? Will students have transportation? There's so many factors that just because we can't do it doesn't mean it will work out. So I'm very glad that the state soup said that she'll meet with us to further discuss and maybe provide some more guidance for us.
Yeah, and you said one thing that I'd like you to elaborate on, and I think you did a little bit. Logistics versus best practice. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Like, what's the tension or the difficulty there?
Yeah, well, I mean, just because we have the space and we have the resources to do something, is it in the best interest, number one, for our students, our families? We want to make sure that they're protected. We want to make sure our safety for our teachers, for our families. That's priority. Um, but in saying that, there a lot of people are still nervous, and they have every right to be. So, is it best practice to bring in 50 students? Of course, we take the temperature. We'll do everything that it takes to make sure that it's done right. But at the same time, is it right? Are we assessing students, let's say access on English proficiency, when even though our teachers have been really at it, have they had enough instruction to really take that measure? That's the best practice. What are we measuring here? Is it just to give the assessment, or really to get that data that's going to help us improve our instruction?
Yeah, thanks for your transparency there. I just can't imagine how difficult it must be to plan for that. One thing you didn't even mention, I don't think, was just the evolving nature of this whole thing in the ground. Who knows where we're going to be in January? So,
Yeah.
like, you're planning this now, and what happens if you plan and I'm not to stress you out, I'm sure you're already thinking about this, but like, what happens if you plan the whole thing and then you just can't do it? I mean, it's just, yeah, this is a great example of the challenges that all districts are facing right now. And in some ways, sort of the pressure from the state level, which they have, I get why they're doing what they're doing, but and then you got an election coming up next week. I mean, it's just like a perfect storm. It's really wild.
Mhm.
So I give you a lot of credit for thinking about those things and trying to set them up the best you can. Um, So what is coming up over the next few weeks? We're going to be chatting on a panel at the Elevation Impact Conference. I'll talk more about that at the end. But what do you have planned for the next couple of weeks here? What's on the sort of top of the agenda?
Well, we have been talking, Maribel and I, with the high school because our 8th grade students are due up for the PSAT. We will be conducting the testing here in our district. So it's just a matter of working with the high school. They will be providing proctors. We have our own proctors. Again, we have to find a system that works. So this, for me, this is great practice for the access
Yeah, yeah.
setup. So, I've already done in-person screening for our kinder students, and we started pre-K testing as well. But now taking it to the middle school, how does that look? What's the process? Who's involved? What is the space? The safety measures, the parent waiting room. All these things are really going to help me look at how to prepare for access. But our 8th graders are due to take this test. We are also launching staff academies, which the majority of them are going to be virtual. But giving our teachers some professional development with the things that they want. So I'll be speaking on elevation and dual language, and so we've given the teachers an opportunity to go ahead and sign up for what they're interested in, and then just waiting for access to get ready to execute in January.
Sounds like it's just an incredible amount of logistics.
Yes.
And weighing, as you said, logistics versus best practice. That's like, man, so many people must be thinking about that right now. I'm glad we brought it up. Well, we'll leave it there. So thanks again for joining us, Juan. And again, Maribel couldn't join us this time, but she was with us for the first 3 episodes, and I'm sure she's behind the scenes doing an incredible amount of work. Want to remind everybody that our next sort of version or iteration of In This Together will be in the form of a panel. So Juan, you'll be joining us along with Vicky Saldala from Broward County in Florida, Dr. Adrian Johnson from Hearn ISD in Texas, Lynn Mara Colon from Prince William County, and Rowena Mack from Saddleback in California. So we have people from all over the country joining us on a panel. That's part of our EL Impact conference, virtual conference, of course. That's on November 10th at 3 p.m. Eastern time. If people are interested in joining, I'll put a link in the top right-hand corner for that. But really looking forward to that one. That's going to be great to get everybody in one place for sure.
Yes, for sure.
Well, until then, Juan, thanks. It's been a pleasure as always. I love the jacket, by the way. That's nice.
Oh,
how do I get one of those?
That we got this for Bosses Day.
I love it.
I'll get you one.
No, great. It shows the pride of the district, and I'm proud of you all as well. Thank you so much for joining us again and sharing with us, Juan. We'll talk to you soon.
All right.